Today, I'm going to attempt to answer probably the most popular question on YouTube, at least for people who watch this channel. And the question is, if I'm 60 years old and I have $1 million in my retirement account, can I afford to retire? Put another way, I cannot work another day. Can I go ahead and quit? So I know other channels have answered this question, but I think if you stick around to the end, you'll be glad you did. And let me explain why. I'm going to begin by using RightCapital, which is the financial planning software that I use. What I'm going to do with RightCapital is very similar to how many financial planners operate. You're going to walk into our office and say, I cannot work another day. I'm done. I want to quit. And then we're going to begin asking you some questions. The first question is, how much money do you think you're going to need to spend in retirement? And then the next question is going to be, do you have Social Security? Do you have pension? And how much money do you have in your investment accounts? And then from there, we're going to enter that information into software like RightCapital or eMoney, and we're going to give you an idea of whether that is a feasible plan. And often it'll be attached to a probability of success. There's going to be a percentage, and it's going to tell you how likely this plan is to succeed or fail. So we're going to start by doing that. We're going to look at Phil and Claire, who we've looked at before, although we're going to change the variables. And we're going to ask the question, if you're 60 years old and you have $1 million in your retirement accounts and $100,000 in the bank, and you want to spend about $8,000 a month, can you afford to retire? So we're going to start there, see how that plan works. But then I want to take a completely different look at this same question. And I think it may surprise some of you how different the answers are going to be. But first, let's jump into RightCapital and kind of look at the situation with Phil and Claire. So here we have Phil and Claire. If you played with RightCapital, I know many of you have access to this, and so you've been able to run some scenarios on your own. But you have the bank. They have $100,000 in their bank account. They have $1 million in their investment accounts, $600,000 in Phil's 401k, $400,000 in Claire's 401k. And then for income, they have $3,200 a month from Phil's Social Security at his full retirement age. And then they have $2,000 a month coming from Claire's Social Security at her full retirement age. Their goal is to retire with $8,000 a month and monthly expenses. So now we can go back over here and we can look at their plan. What's the probability of success? So this number is what a lot of advisors use to help people know how they're doing on their retirement journey. And so this number is based on a Monte Carlo simulation. So what the computer does is it runs 1,000 different simulations, 1,000 different possible worlds, and says in each of these different variables, right, the market goes up, the market goes down, the market stays flat. And so what the computer does is says, in what percentage of those probable worlds that we tested does this plan work? So in 25% of the possible worlds, no problem. In 75% of the possible worlds, this plan fails. So then what an advisor will do is they'll come down here and say, okay, what can we do to maybe improve this plan? So maybe they could take a bit more aggressive investment risk. They can go maybe a 60-40 to a 70-30. Let's see if that does anything. So that bumps it up a little bit. And then what they can do is they can say, we're using just an inflation-adjusted retirement spending. So then they come look at this inflation-adjusted retirement spending. So often when someone is calculating retirement spending, what they'll do is they'll take, you need $8,000 a month to live in 2024. And then we'll look at that same number in 2025, but we'll add the rate of inflation. So if it's 3%, we'll take $8,000 a month plus 3%. And then the next year, we'll take that new number, and then we'll add another 3% of inflation or whatever the number ends up being for the rate of inflation for those years. And we just keep going, adding. And so that number just keeps building and building and building and building throughout your retirement. It's kind of this flat linear line that just keeps increasing by the rate of inflation. But of course, that's not how retirement spending works. It looks more like a smile. If you've watched this channel at all, you're tired of hearing this. But typically, it's much higher early in your retirement when you begin to do all the things that you dreamed of doing in retirement, going to see the grandkids, taking those trips, golfing. But then as time goes on, you kind of get tired of taking trips and maybe you're a little, less energetic. And so you start staying home more and you just spend less money. And then for some people, if there's long-term care needs later in retirement, there might be another spike towards the end of retirement. That's called the retirement spending smile. So what if we move away from just kind of this linear inflation-adjusted spending to the retirement spending smile? Let's refresh it. And now you can see after we made that adjustment, we took it from a 25% probability of success to an 80% probability of success. Most people are beginning to feel a bit better right about now and are already beginning to imagine what they're going to tell the boss on Monday morning. And we could keep tweaking this strategy, trying to make it even better, right? We could play with the asset allocation. We could play with Social Security, maybe finding an optimal strategy around Social Security. We could have Phil work part-time or Claire work part-time to fill a gap, right? There's all these different things we could do to begin to make this plan even more successful. But a group of advisors have begun to push back against a Monte Carlo-based way of doing financial planning. And one of the reasons they're pushing back is because it's a flawed system, partially because it's a binary system. So let me give you an example. Let's say that Phil and Claire need $8,000 a month to live, but the market is doing poorly and they're only able to pull $7,000 in one of the possible worlds. Remember, there's 1,000 different possible worlds. And one of those worlds, they cannot pull the full $8,000. They can only do $7,000. In a Monte Carlo world, that's considered failure, right? It's pass fail. Did it give them $8,000 a month or did it give them $7,000 a month? In reality, what most people do is they just spend a little bit less, they tighten their belt, and everything would be fine. So there's a group of financial advisors who say, there needs to be a better way to do this. We need a dynamic income strategy that can evolve with the market as the market moves up and down. And so to help advisors kind of implement a dynamic income strategy, there's a new piece of software that's been released called IncomeLab. It's been around for a couple of years, and I've just started testing it in the back end. I haven't rolled it out to clients yet. I'm still using RightCapital. In fact, I always will use RightCapital. I think it's a really powerful planning tool. But I've been kind of interested to compare and contrast how IncomeLab handles retirement planning as opposed to RightCapital. Like I said, I haven't rolled this out to clients yet. Most clients haven't seen this because I don't want them to be guinea pigs, but I am playing in the round in the background and double checking my assumptions using IncomeLab. And so today I want to walk you through IncomeLab. I am a novice at this. I have not spent much time in the software at all. So I am showing you something that I'm not very proficient at, but I think you'll find it really interesting how IncomeLab approaches retirement income as opposed to RightCapital. So I'm going to use the same variables. Phil and Claire are the same age. They're 60 years old. They're going to retire at age 60. They have $1 million in their retirement accounts. They have $100,000 in the bank, and they have a little bit of Social Security coming in. So let's flip over to IncomeLab and see how it looks different. So let's start by looking at the variables. So here's the plan info. One thing to note, in both plans, I have them as residents of the state of Florida, simply because I didn't want to deal with state taxes for this example. Then I have they're 60 years old, their assets. Phil has $600,000 in his IRA. Claire has $400,000. And then they have a little bit of Social Security, same numbers. Phil's primary insurance amount is $3,200. Claire's primary insurance amount is $2,000. And their expenses are $8,000, or that's what they'd like to do. Now, here's where IncomeLab looks completely different than RightCapital. Because what IncomeLab does is it says, look, the current balance is $1 million, right? That's how much they have in their accounts, plus $100,000 in their checking account. Their spending capacity is $7,700 a month. What I really like about this is typically when someone comes to me, I ask them, how much money do you spend? And then I try to build a plan around this. What this software does is it comes at it from a different approach. It shows you your spending capacity. If you have $1 million, your spending capacity is $7,700. Then it gives you a number to work backwards from. And for some people, I think that's really helpful. Instead of making them come up with a number and then trying to build a plan around that number to say, look, you can spend $7,700 a month. Do you think you can retire on that? And then here's where that dynamic strategy really comes into play. So you can see here, you've got these guardrails, and this is slightly different than the traditional guardrail strategy, but that's for another video. You can see if the market does really well, if the market is up by 5%, you can spend an extra $385 a month. So you can spend a little bit more. But here's what's really interesting. If you have a 20% drawdown in the market, you can still spend $7,300 a month. And so now you have a very concrete number. One of the problems with guardrail strategies and some of the other more dynamic income strategies, it's just really hard for clients to know how much can I spend and is this the time I need to pull back? Well, this software will actually hook up to the custodians, like we use Schwab and Fidelity. It'll hook up to those custodians and then it'll pull your account data in, and then you can see based upon where I am right now, how much money can I spend? And so when you and your advisor meet, you have this conversation, how much money can I safely spend this month or this quarter? And you have a much clearer number. So now I want to show you one of my favorite features. You could actually stress test this plan, and you have lots of different stress tests. So this one we're going to look at is the Great Financial Crisis. So you can kind of see what would have happened before kind of you're heading into the crisis, 2009. If your plan spending had been $7,700 or $7,750 with a little inflation, you have to cut your spending by about $400 a month during kind of the worst parts of the crisis. And then you could say, what happened after the financial crisis? And what you see is not only can, this is kind of our most recent past 10, 15 years, you can see not only could you pull the $7,700 a month you need to live on, but that amount would have continued to increase. And by today, you'd be spending almost $11,000 a month and you'd be completely okay. I should mention that these are real numbers it's using, not nominal numbers. So it's taking into account inflation. But what I like about IncomeLabs is it gives you this number that if you have $1 million portfolio, you should be able to spend $7,700. And if there's a market drawdown, if 5% or 20% drawdown, you need to pull down your spending by this amount. And if we're in the next great financial crisis or the COVID crash, it could be $1,000 a month. If you're spending $7,700, can you cut your budget to $6,700? And if you look at your budget and you're like, yeah, no, I can live on $6,700, then you can probably go in on Monday morning and tell your boss you quit. Don't go do that. We need to do some more planning. But theoretically, right, if in a bad market downturn, you could just tighten your belt, then you could probably go ahead and retire. Now, I'm going to end it there. My goal with this video was not to give you all the tools you need to develop a retirement plan. In fact, we could have really optimized the RightCapital plan even more. We could have optimized the retirement lab plan anymore. But I wanted to just look very basic using simple variables at a traditional Monte Carlo based retirement plan and a dynamic income retirement plan and kind of compare and contrast how they approach retirement spending. So leave a note in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts. Would a dynamic income strategy, being able to visually see how much you could spend and maybe check in with your advisor once a month or once a quarter on that number, would that help provide any peace of mind as you enter retirement? Or would you prefer a traditional Monte Carlo based probability of success and say, look, you've got a 95% chance of this plan winning or working or winning? Or would you rather something more like the dynamic income strategy? I'm kind of curious your reaction to kind of the dynamic income strategy and if it would provide any additional benefit or peace of mind as I consider rolling this out in my firm. Hey, thanks for watching. And if you heard me mention in there Roth conversions and more optimizations, I have an entire video where I talk about the impact of Roth conversions and how it could potentially save you a fortune in retirement. And you can watch it now.